right, just to get kind of a baseline, how many people in here have contributed to open source at some point? Okay. How many people don't even know what open source software is? Nice. We got at least one who's like, I don't know. Two. There we go. Fantastic. Well, as you said, my name is April, and I've spent the last 5 months contributing to open source. And prior to that, which is not a long time, but prior to that, I was like so many of you guys in this room trying to get started. I taught myself through online resources, so I didn't have a boot camp or a degree program or anything like that to get the connections or the experience or any of that. And I kept hearing over and over and over again, contribute to open source, contribute to open source. It's a way for you to get out there and show what you can do and people can see it. And I was like, great, fantastic. How do I do that? And then I started to get steps. Oh, here's the ABC. And I was like, great. So then I went there and I was like, I'm completely overwhelmed. I don't know if any of you guys know this, but GitHub is very, very, very large. There are a lot of repos out there. Some are well maintained. Most not so much. So it can get a little overwhelming. So I'm hoping to be able to just cut through some of that noise, give you a little bit of a direction, give you some resources. I think once you have the basic fundamental skills of how to contribute, then finding the projects and the tasks and the things to work on becomes just a little bit less overwhelming. So without further ado, let's get started. So what is open source? Traditionally in a commercial environment or a commercial software, proprietary software, the source code is owned by somebody. It's usually has like their intellectual property, and that can be an individual person or a corporation. And those are the types of programs that you typically pay to use. Your Microsoft Words, your Photoshops, those types of items. Open source, on the other hand, is a collaborative effort. It's a place in where they publish their source code and share it with anybody who might want to be able to take that source code down and make changes and adjustments to it. Sometimes those changes are for personal use, and sometimes those are changes because you are wanting to fix something that's either broken or not working quite right within the code. Oftentimes those are referred to as issues or bugs. And then also you can build features. You can say it would be really nice if this had XYZ function. So you have the opportunity to pull the source code down and try to see if you can build XYZ function and then send it up and say, what do you guys think? But more traditionally, people will look for issues, look for bugs, look for things that the maintainers are already looking for help on, and then offer their services to help out with those. So the why should you contribute? They touched on it a little bit with the message that they sent out with Slack notification. It is an excellent way for you to have demonstrable proof of the skills that you have. That's step one. I mean, that's the biggest, and from my point of view, where I come from in trying to acquire a permanent job in this industry, it's the best business card I could have, is to be able to say, take a look at my repo that I worked on this particular project and see my code. You can see how I interacted with the maintainers. Was I open to suggestion or did I argue at every turn? All of those things are indicators to an employer that, one, you know the process of working collaboratively on a team, but also that you have the skills that are needed as far as the coding goes. It's also there's a community, and most of the repos that are out there, or they don't really consider themselves companies, they consider themselves communities. So it's the Gatsby community, it's the Mozilla community, and because it really is a cooperative effort from not only the core developers, but also anybody who is interested in contributing to the project. The other thing too is that you might just have a really good idea that hadn't been thought of, or maybe it was thought of, but there was too many other things and they kind of brushed it aside. So like you don't know if you come in with an idea or a fix, or for example, I am currently working in an internship with Mozilla, and they assigned me a task to add the ability to select what it's a localization, so a language translation app. So if you wanted to choose which language that the source code would start in, because it defaults to English, but maybe English is your third language and you would rather translate from your second language. So to me, it seemed like, you know, a minor fix. Like, oh, okay, just one more preference. Come to find out once I finished it, for those individuals who wanted that feature, it was a really big deal. Like that made a big difference in their workflow to be able to just simply choose which source language they used. So, you know, it feels really awesome to know that something I contributed to not only helped me become a better developer, but now the end user has a better experience as a result of it. So it's very rewarding. So how can you contribute? We've already talked a lot about the fact that you can contribute by providing code. This is typically through, like I said, bug fixes or added features or different things. Oftentimes when you're first starting out, it's a good idea to get things that are labeled as first bugs, which are literally change the name of this variable or make this button green instead of red. And the reason that they put those options out there for you is that the process of contributing is overwhelming, especially on some of these repos. So if you're not having to think about difficult code on top of how do I even do this process, it just makes it a lot less overwhelming for you. So you can start by doing one of those little code pieces and get that done, and then, oh, okay, I understand the process now. I know how to clone my code. I know how to make a pull request. I know how to make changes and then resubmit my work. All of those things have been taken care of on this tiny little fix. So now I can take up something that's a little bigger, and I can focus a little bit more on the code part of it and build from there. And that's where it's really great to develop a relationship with the maintainers, particularly if you like that code or you really like that project, because then you can reach out to them and say, hey, what can I work on next? Which of the pieces that you have that need to be done do you think I would be able to do? But if you're not a coder or you don't want to take on code, documentation is a fantastic place to go to. I mean, how many times have we read documentation where we're like, I'm sorry, what? Okay, let me read that again. And you have to read it 3 or 4 times to like grasp what they're trying to tell you. So rewrite it in a way that makes it make more sense to you, and then submit that to them saying that, you know, I read through this documentation and I got really confused in this section. I took a moment once I figured it out to kind of reword it a little bit to where it makes more sense to me. Maybe other members of your community would benefit from that. And send the PR in. Worst case scenario, they say, nah, that's all right, we're going to leave it the way it is. And that's their choice, you know. I mean, now you know what, you have your own personal documentation that makes it make more sense. There's also options to fix CSS, user experience, UI things. So if design is more of your speed, then just look for things that are more geared towards design aspects. I'm trying to think of, I actually just looked up free code count just to see kind of what they had out there. And I think they had 4 or 5 that were literally just UI fixes. So if design is more of your preference, then go out there and look for things and ways that you can go in and make a difference on the design front. And that also kind of falls a little bit, the documentation is in regards to grammatical or typographical errors, things like if you're reading the documentation and you notice that it has a typo. Pull the code, fix it, send it back up. They'll appreciate it. It's one less thing. They've probably seen it, but they have a pile this big of stuff that they're working on, and that typo is not at the top. So to just take that second to go through the process and fix it and send it back up to them is going to be appreciated, as small as that piece is. And there's also some, this one I discovered when I was doing the month of October. They have Oktoberfest. Where if you submit 4 PRs over the course of October, they send DigitalOcean and DevTO sends you a t-shirt and some stickers. So I'm like, free stuff, yeah. So I was working on my Mozilla contribution at the time, so I had some stuff going on, but those were starting to get a little bigger and more time consumptive. And so in order to just get my 4 PRs in so I could get my t-shirt and just relax a little bit, I found changelog, which is a repo that has they do multiple podcasts, and they do their transcripts in Markdown and put them in GitHub, and anybody can go through and pull down their transcripts, fix unintelligibles, fix typos, maybe find links for resources that are mentioned, like if somebody within an interview talks about www.xyz.com, then you go in, find the link, and attach the link to the markup. Super easy, and you still get credit and get to put on as a contributor for their program. So it's another way that is non-technical, but allows you to go in and get the process down without being overwhelmed by all of it. So where do you find the projects? We mentioned GitHub. That's where the majority of them are most likely to be. But there are also companies that keep their repos, store them themselves, or have different systems in place. And the most notable ones that I know of is Mozilla and WordPress. They both use for their central code bases. I actually am working out of GitHub for my Mozilla project because they do store their code for this particular project there. But it is still maintained as far as keeping track of where all the fixes are and everything through their system called Bugzilla. So it is still offline. There are no issues. It's not even an issues tab on the GitHub repo because it's all taken care of on Bugzilla. But there are other teams within Mozilla that do everything on GitHub. There's the add-on containers, I know for sure, is one where they put all their issues, everything, they track it all through GitHub. But their main central, like Firefox and DevTools and some of their bigger pieces are in their central code base, and that is in a different system and uses Mercurial for its version control instead of Git. So it is one more piece that you have to kind of learn. But it's not that dissimilar from Git, and if I can learn it, y'all can learn it. So WordPress also keeps their code and their bug tracking in their own system called Trac, T-R-A-C. And they use a version control system called Subversion. So that's partly why it's not on GitHub, because it's a different version control. And I have yet to put my toes into Subversion, but again, it's version control. I mean, there's not going to be massive differences between them. There's just going to be different commands and slight things that you'll need to learn. So first steps. You're going to want to find a good first issue. We talked a little bit about that. And in a minute, I'm going to show you some resources. And then at the end, I'll go ahead and put that slide back up. So if you wanted to take notes or whatever. And I'm also going to put a document into the Slack feed, the general, just that has kind of all the links that I may discuss today so that you guys have those as references and resources to go back to. So once you find a good first issue, you're going to want to reach out to the maintainer. And ask them if they still need work on this, because sometimes things will get put up, especially issues that are unverified. Sometimes that's just a user who said, I had a problem doing XYZ. And then they actually haven't verified whether or not that's a legitimate bug yet. So they may or may not want somebody working on it until they've had a chance to go in and verify if it is indeed even an issue or if it was just something that was unique to that one user and their system or setup. So you definitely want to try to reach out to the maintainer to find out if it still needs to be worked on, and also to ask any clarification, because sometimes issues are put up and they're put up just very general terms. When I go to here, this happens and this should have happened. Okay, so then you might want more information. Okay, where in the code is that, or what part of that is, and what were the steps that I need to do to recreate it, things that you might want to have a better understanding of before you jump in. And then the most important part is to read the contribution documentation. Every repo has their own procedures. Some of them are going to overlap and be the same. Some of them are going to be unique. But if you want your pull request to get accepted, it needs to meet the needs of that repository. So it needs to have the styling the coding needs to be in the correct styles. If they want 4 tab indent instead of a 2, you're going to need to have that. They're not going to put your stuff in unless you do. So there's also a lot of times setup instructions that are unique to that project, things that you need to download, dependencies that you're going to need to have. Any of those kind of situations are all going to be addressed within the documentation. Again, the Mozilla project that I'm working on, it's contained in Docker. And so I had to install and set up Docker. I had to make sure that I had Make attached because everything runs through Make for the builds and the tests and the everything. So there were steps that I had to take and put into place before I could even begin to work on their code. So going through the resources for finding good first bugs. This one is great, and it's actually new to GitHub within the last couple of months. If you type in github.com/topics, it will give you a list of the popular topics that are in, I guess, searched or utilized within GitHub. So anything from like Babel to Jest to, I mean, just a ton of stuff. And you can even take it a little bit more granular and do another / and then like specifically JavaScript. And then it'll show you repos that all have JavaScript as a tag within them. So you can start going through those repos and finding, things that are specifically attached to a language that you're interested in working in, or maybe it's like I put in Mozilla, and so then I got all the repos that were either owned by or in some way mentioned Mozilla. I think I even got stuff that just had Fox in it. Like it went that deep. I was like, why is this one here? Oh, it talks about an Arctic fox. Okay. Even though I just put Mozilla. So it's actually super helpful, and again, it's only been within the last couple of months that they put that in, because that was the biggest hurdle for me trying to get started on GitHub, is how do I find a repo that is written in a language that I know how to code in, where I can actually make a contribution to. And so this just narrows that massive pool into a less massive pool. There's also a GitHub repo by username Muan, and just called Hello World. And it is literally a repo that is 100% just there for you to practice cloning code, making a change to it, and then submitting a pull request. So that just the process of how do I make a pull request, how do I do this, can be done in a completely non-intimidating, nobody gives, a hoot how you do it way. So it's a great resource for just going in there and just getting the steps down without worrying about you're not going to break anything. There is a website that was an initiative from Scott Hanselman of Microsoft and Kent C. Dodds called firsttimersonly.com, and it is a resource specifically geared towards getting people started in open source contributing. So they have they just have a ton of different resources in there. Some of them are going to piggyback on what I've already shared, but there's also just other information and ways that you can, find and contribute for your first time. And then Mozilla has their own system set up called codetribute.mozilla.org, and this is a site that aggregates their good first issues from all of their teams. And it has a search bar on the side. Again, you can pick language if you want to go language specific. And then on the other half of the screen, or 3/4 of the screen, is if you know that there's a particular project that you're interested in. One of the things that makes it a slight bit easier to get started is if you already are familiar with the product itself. So if I was trying to do contributions to, say, Angular, I would struggle, because I don't use Angular. So I kind of don't really know how Angular works, other than the little bit that I learned from Felipe's presentations. But I haven't worked in it myself. So that's just going to be one more layer of learning for me, because then I would then have to learn at least the basics of Angular before I could coherently start to go in there and do stuff with their code. And so it's doable, and I know that because I knew nothing about the product that I'm working on with Mozilla, Pontoon, prior to doing my contributions. But that was part of my learning curve, was, okay, I'm supposed to be putting this in place and supposed to do this, but I don't even know where that happens to know where to look in the code for it. So, it was a lot of detective work from my point of view. And then finally, the resource Your First PR is a Twitter account where maintainers from GitHub repos will post first issues that they have, that they would love to have somebody come and contribute to. So you can follow at Your First PR on Twitter, or even just stop in on their page every once in a while and see who's posted what, and if it's something that would interest you. So steps to reaching out to the maintainer. One of the things is you want to definitely check to make sure if somebody's already working on it. And the easiest way to do that is, if you see a description that looks interesting to you, is to go ahead and click on it and open it up so you can see the comments. And oftentimes there'll be a string of comments or even just one or two. And sometimes it's just getting clarification on what exactly is this bug. How do I reproduce it? You know, whatever, those kinds of things. But somewhere in there, there will often be somebody saying, hey, I'm willing to take this on. And then the maintainer will say, great, go ahead and take a stab at it. They don't always officially assign it to them. So you want to make sure that even though it says unassigned, that you do check the comments to see if somebody's working on it. If they are working on it, but it's been 3 months and there's no PR and there's no additional comments or questions, go ahead and put your name out there and say, hey, I'm not sure if, you know, John's still working on this, but I'd love to take a shot at it if he's not able to get it, you know, finished, or help him out if he needs it or something. And then the maintainer has the choice to say, do I let John finish who hasn't done anything, or do I go ahead and let this person get started on it? And so then they'll let you know. But you can go ahead and start work on something, because at the end of the day, you still get to keep that work. And once you fork that repo into your account, the branches and the things that you make on it are going to be in your fork, so you can still do the work and you can still have the proof of, you know, I made this functional. This piece was broken and I went in and now it's not broken and here's the code to show for it. But you're just probably not going to get that merged into the actual project if they already have a submission for it, or if it was something that they decided wasn't important to them at the moment. But you don't lose the work, and so you don't miss anything if you go ahead and check on it. And then I did mark on here like how to find out who the maintainer is, like especially if you're going to do a PR that isn't based off of an issue itself. It's usually the people who have contributed to the project the most. So if you look on there and they have 1,000 commits to it, and everybody else has 100 or 10, he's probably the maintainer. All right, so reading the contribution docs, where are you going to find those? More often than not, you're going to find them in the READMEs. And if they're not directly in the READMEs, then there'll be a link to them from the READMEs. So I always start at the README on the repos page to find out where the contribution docs are. So on this one, I went ahead for IESD. If you scroll down their README, you can see they have links for both how to get started, what kind of technologies they use for the front end, the back end for their testing, and then all of their contribution information that you need to know in regards to just contributing in general, the style that they expect, the design, because you want to make sure that if you're going to put in a red button that you put in the right shade of red. So you want to check the design specifications to find out, okay, which hex code is that. And then you can see up on the changelog transcripts, they actually put the entirety of the instructions within their README because there's not much to it. Download the transcripts, fix some stuff, and send it back to us, please. And then the final place that you can look for it, you can see is sometimes it gets tucked up into the actual files. And it'll almost always be labeled something contributing or contribution or something along those lines. And then you can go ahead and pull it out directly from the files. But I'll be honest in the sense that I don't think I have personally run into a repo outside of maybe just a personal repo that somebody threw up there that doesn't have their contribution information in their README somewhere. Because if they're asking for contributions, they want you to do it in a way that's going to make less work for them. And the way they do that is to tell you how to do it so that they have less work. So you found your task, you're ready to go. Now what do you do? The first thing you want to do is you need to get the code onto your system locally. And it's a little bit of a multi-tiered process. And I'm going to go through each of these steps here individually as well. But you're going to need to fork the repo, then you need to make a clone of it, set up your file in your local system, and then add your clone fork to your file, and then you're going to make a branch, which is very, very important, and we'll talk specifically about that in a minute, and then begin working. And again, this is all based off of GitHub's process, because that's where you're more likely to be working off of and finding work for. If you wanted to do Mozilla's, it is similar. You're going to make a copy of the code, you're going to do your work, you're going to make your branches, and then you're going to send it out. It's just going through a different system. But I'm going to focus on GitHub because that's where the majority of you are going to end up working. So forking your repo. So if you go to, I'm using Inland Empire's, the IESD's main website, which is actually the repository for our organization's website. Contributions are gladly accepted, and there are some open issues. So if you want to start with a repo where you can tell you that maintainers are kind of cool people, so it'd be a good place to start. You'll notice at the very top of the screen there's the little button that says fork. So if you are logged into GitHub, which you will need to have a GitHub account, so if you don't, that's going to be step one, is getting a GitHub account.
And if you're a developer, you should have that.
Yes, you should. So as soon as you hit the fork button, GitHub's going to automatically make a copy of that repo over to your account. So you now have a copy of that repo attached to you. And then from there, you're going to want to go back to your repo and make a clone of that. And so you can see on this one here, this is my my GitHub account. So it's ableler2 and then /main, because that was the name of the repo that I forked. And so right underneath it, you can see that it was forked from Inland Empire. So if I click on that, I can go back to the original repo at any time if I need to. And then it shows anybody else that this is a fork and not my actual work. And then once you click on the button to clone or download, you're going to want to clone it. And the reason for that is because when you clone it, you get a copy of its history, and it's a functional Git repo. If you download it, all you get is the most recent commit of the default branch. So it doesn't download any of the Git files. And then when you go to try to push your code, it's going to be like, you don't have a Git repo, so there's nothing to push. So you definitely want to make sure that you're cloning it. It just makes everything much more smooth. It also defaults to HTTPS, but if you wanted to be a little bit more secure, you could set up an SSH. What was that shaky?
No,
good. So SSH is just a protocol secure shell, and it's just another method for securely connecting one remote computer to another. So you can see here, once I have, I made the clone by you can either copy and paste, or if you just click the little copy button, it'll copy the link to that repo. So then I went into my system on my computer, and in my documents folder, I made a folder called IESD. And so I then moved into that directory and added git clone, and then pasted the email or the web address URL for the repo that I just created with my fork. And hit enter, and you can see on the side there, I now have all of the files from the IESD's main repo in my local machine to work on.
And someone should point out before we move to the next slide that you have hearts.
I do. I changed my thing.
I love it.
I was learning how to do bash, and so I was playing around. So if you know that you're going to be working on the project for more than just a simple bug fix, it's a really good idea to set it as an upstream and set up an upstream to the original repository's master branch. And the reason why you want to do that is because you want to be able to stay up to date. There are a bunch of other contributors, both core and just other contributors, that are adding and getting things merged into the master branch while you're working on yours. And so in order to make sure that you have a connection so that you can keep the amount of conflicts that might occur when you go to send your code up, you want to make sure that you have linked yourself to the upstream of that original branch. It's a pretty easy process all in all. So I just kind of walk through all of it. I usually do a git status to make sure that I'm on my master branch. And then you just git remote add upstream, and you're going to make that same URL clone that you made of your own repo. You're going to do that on the original repo. So if you go back to yours and where it says forked from, you can click on that link, which takes you back to their repo, and then you can clone it from there, and then you're going to get the URL to the original repo. And again, hit enter, and you've got your upstream set up. So then from there, whenever you need to update your code, you'll just traverse back to your master branch and do a git pull upstream master. So if you're pulling from your own repos, more often than not, you're pulling from origin. So in this case, you would be pulling from upstream. So now you've got it on, you've got your upstream set, you're ready to go. Here's where you need to make your branch. And there are a number of reasons why you need to make branches, but the biggest one is the fact that It allows you to isolate your work. So everything that you do on your branch is only on your branch. You can break everything, and it doesn't matter because it's only on your branch. And it also makes it easier when you are getting ready to test things, or for them to be able to review and see whether or not it's going to have multiple conflicts, as if you have this smaller piece of code fixes or whatever on an individual branch. So even if you're working on the same repository and maybe you're doing a bug fix and you're also doing a feature build, you want to make sure that you have a separate branch for each of those activities. So at the end of the day, it's what's expected. So if you're using this as your calling card, you want to have branches because you want to be able to show not only the maintainers to be willing to accept your work, but also for future employers to be able to say, go check out my Git repo, and if you're putting everything into master and getting things declined left, right, and center, that's not really going to give you a nice shining star. So one of the things I love about it, again, is you get to break stuff and not worry. I mean, that's kind of what coding is you go in, you break stuff, and then you fix it and make it all work nice together. So doing it safely on a branch and being able to work your commits in a way that you can get, okay, it's working up to this point, let me commit it, and then let me break it again. And now I know that worst case scenario, I go back to at least that last working version. And then it allows you to be freer with the things and the choices that you make in regards to how you try to approach a problem. All right, so you've completed your work and you're ready to push it up to the remote repo. First thing, obviously, is you need to be committing, and that you should be doing throughout the process for your own sake, so that you don't walk away from your computer and it suddenly did an update and 3 hours worth of work that you put into it is suddenly not there anymore. So if you've committed it, then you'll be able to get that back again. So it's a pretty simple process. Again, I always like to try to start with Git status because, especially now that I'm working on more than one code base, sometimes I'm in the wrong code base. Or I try to go do something on a branch and I'm not actually on that branch. And it just makes it so you don't have to. I think I like Yuan says, I just try not to break things. Whenever I ask him, how do I fix this in Git? He's like, just don't break it in the first place. So Git status is one of those ways that you can avoid breaking it in the first place. So Git status, it shows me that I moved into my own branch this time around because I wanted to actually go through the pull request, and I don't have anything actively that I'm working on with main. And even if I did, it wasn't complete. So this is just one of my practice repos that I have where as I'm doing work, I just throw it up so that I have activity on my GitHub. So I just did Git status. I'm on my pull request demo branch, and I have one untracked file, which is my hello world.txt. So then you see the next line I go in, I do a git add, and I add that file. I could do a git add and then a period, just a dot, and it would add anything that needed to be committed or added to the staging. I do that a lot, but you do need to do it with caution because if there's a file in there that you didn't actually want to commit or send up, it's going to get included. So just kind of be mindful of that. The dot will take everything. And then what I didn't show was right after the add, if I had done git status again, my hello world.txt would be in green, and it would be showing me that that's now staged and ready to be committed. And then the next line, of course, git commit -m is because I'm going to leave a message to show what this commit did. And in this case, it was an example to just demo how to do a pull request. And so you can see at the bottom that it created the node, which is just the SHA for that particular change that I made into my commit history. And then for me to push it back to my remote GitHub account, I just do a git push origin and the name of the branch. And that is the way you will do it with another, even if you're working on a forked repo. So even though you set up an upstream, you're not going to want to commit it directly to the upstream. You want to actually commit it to the forked version that you have, and then you're going to do the pull request to the upstream account. And that's going to be the next step that we're going to do. So then you can see at the bottom there that now it created a new branch called pull request demo, and then pull request demo. So my repo now has a new branch on it. Once you do that pull and you go back to GitHub, I think it's like 10 minutes. I can't remember how long. It keeps it highlighted at the top. But there's a limited period of time where it will automatically come up at the top like that with the highlight to say, you just sent a branch up, would you like to create a pull request? And so, yes, I do. The other way to go about it, if for some reason you do the pull request and, I don't know, you have to go pick your kid up from school and you don't have time to actually type out the description of what you did, but you wanted to get the code up there or something, whatever, something blows up, the kitchen's on fire, whatever. You can come.
Go from picking your kid up to the kitchen's on fire.
Yeah, right? You see how chaotic my house is.
Right.
So you can go back to it. If you go back to your own repo, there's the new pull request button, and you select that. It's going to give you the drop-down button and show like you're going to go from master, or you're requesting to put your code into master. So that's the first selection that you make. And then you can see the drop down. I'd be able to go down and drop and grab the branch that I just submitted and say, this is the branch I would like to request be merged into the master branch. So once you've done that and you've got your pull request, this is an example of what a pull request would look like from the other side. And it actually includes a review that came back for me because I wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit as well. So in this case, I filed a bug for the item that, or the account that I'm working on with Mozilla. If you've done a bug, then you do your pull requests with the fix bug and then the number of the bug, because that's all linked with hooks so that it automatically updates Bugzilla, and anybody who needs to know knows that there's been a pull request put up for that particular bug and it needs to be reviewed. So that's the, again, back into the setup instructions for contributing. That's the guidelines that they put in there for how to do a pull request for this particular repo. And so it basically, I just put a brief description about what I was doing in regards to what the problem was. Originally, the priority and unreviewed columns had the projects, they had an initial ascending order, and they wanted it to do a descending order so that you could, you know, have the most important at the top, etc. So that's, you know, this fixes that is basically what I'm saying. And then you can see the two commits that I had on it. It was a smaller piece, so there wasn't a lot of work. And then Matjas, who's my mentor and the maintainer on this particular repo, took a look at it. So that's just a general comment there. And then you can see the inline comment is where he actually went into the code and said, at this particular location, I would like you to do this instead, or this needs to be done. So then you can see the actual code that they're referencing, because it's going to be right within the code itself. It's called an inline comment. So in this case, he was right, and I actually fixed it. No, he was right, but it needed just an extra step in order to isolate it and then also future-proof it. So I just went ahead and made that alternate change and let him know what I did, so that when I send up my new thing, he knows exactly kind of what the process was and where we're at. And then you get to celebrate your efforts. Yay! I did it! And I will tell you, that first pull request, and you get the message that says your pull request has been merged, feels really good. My very first pull request that I did was to the Mozilla database, or code base, and I didn't even add anything. I literally deleted 4 lines of CSS that ended up duplicated in a rebase. It was still amazing. I was like, oh my God, I did it. I just contributed to Mozilla. It was just such a great feeling. So I highly encourage it. All right, so here's just some final things I wanted to talk about. And these are just important soft skills. So we talked a lot about like the hard code skills as far as pulling and forking and all of that, as well as the actual coding. So you need to communicate, and then communicate, and then communicate again. Most of this work, in this case with you doing contributions, it's going to be remote, and they don't know what's happening. So maybe you asked to work on a bug and you're that person who's had this bug sitting there for 3 months and you're actively working on it, but it's a part-time thing, so you're working on it maybe on Saturday afternoon, so it's taking you a little while, but you're making progress and you're getting there and you're solving the issues and slowly but surely. But you're not communicating to the maintainer that, hey, I'm still working on this, or even sending up some code to say, here's where I'm at, I'm still working on these other pieces. They don't know. To them, you've just ghosted. You've just decided it was too much, you were too busy, whatever the case may be, and you're not working on it anymore. They'll assign it to somebody else, and then all the work you did is just for yourself because you're not going to get it pulled anymore because now somebody else is going to come in and do the work. So make sure that you're communicating, and if you take on a task and you realize life is too busy, I just picked up and I finally got that job that I've been looking for, and so now I just don't have the time. That's fine. Just let the maintainer know. Just reach back out and say, hey, I'm so sorry. Things have changed and I'm not going to have time to work on this bug anymore. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Or just, I can't do it anymore. You don't have to be that kind. But just that way they know and they understand nobody's working on this anymore. And then they can make the next decision. Do I need to assign it to somebody else? Do I need to do it myself? Or is it okay if it just sits there and waits for somebody else to find it? But if it's sitting there assigned to somebody and nobody's working on it, they don't want to be rude either. They don't want to jump in and say, hey, John, you said you were going to work on this and you're not doing anything. The hell, so just communicate. Don't be afraid to contribute. That was kind of one of my other big hang-ups was, oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not going to know how to do anything. There are tasks out there that are small, that are doable. And again, once you get the process down, it becomes easier and easier and easier. And then you find that you want to take on the bigger things. You want to do more. With that said, though, you do need to make sure that you have the required skill sets. So if it's something that it's being done in React and you haven't even gone through the basic documentation of React and built a simple Hello World app, you probably shouldn't be contributing to a React project because it's going to be a lot. And the maintainers or the mentors or anybody who's assigned all that, they don't mind helping you out, but they can't teach you how to do React. Like they can't teach you the language or the framework. You do have to come in with at least the basic skill sets. And sometimes that'll be mentioned in the README as far as the technologies that are used, and sometimes you'll just have to look at the code to kind of get a sense of what they're doing and what they're using. Don't be afraid to ask questions, but definitely do your research first. So if you're up against a block and you don't know how to get past that, you're probably not the first person who's hit that block and hit that wall. So go out on Google and search for it. Check out Stack Overflow. Try multiple different ways of phrasing it because the way you think of it might not be the way somebody posted it when they put it on there. So, there was one example. I searched for the longest time to find a way to convert Python's underscores into JavaScript's camel cases. And so I found a way and I did it, and it was, using, I don't remember how I did it. All I know is that my mentor looked at that and said, that's a little complicated. My response was, great, if you have a solution, please let me know, because I searched and searched and searched, and this is really the only answer that I was able to come up with that gave me the function I needed. To which he then sent me a link, and it was all about the search. It was the terminology that I was using in my search didn't get me close enough, whereas the search terminology that he used got us where we needed to be, and it was a much more concise solution to the problem. But I did do my due diligence first. The other thing, too, is if you come in and you just say, step 2, the developer setup doesn't work for me. How? How is that not working for you? What errors did you get? So what's going to end up happening is the maintainer is going to have to ask you all those questions, and that's just going to delay everything. And if you're already dealing with maybe somebody who's in Europe and there's an 8-hour time difference between you, or they're working full time on their own stuff, and so they just check in once a day. You may only get an answer every 24 hours from them, and so every time you don't give quite enough information, you have to wait another 24 hours for them to ask you the next question. So You need to make sure, step 2 of the developer setup isn't working for me because I'm getting this error, and here's a copy of my traceback that it showed me, so that you can go in and they can kind of start to diagnose it before they even respond back to you, and they might be able to, in one end transaction or interaction, get you back on your feet again. So the other one is, don't be afraid of more complex tasks, but also know when to quit. So this is a little bit more geared for items that maybe have mentors involved versus just a standard maintainer. But even with maintainers, they're not opposed to helping you grow and develop. Many of them started out in open source in exactly that same way. And so, but they want to know that you're putting in the effort and that you're making the growth and taking the time to learn from it. In many cases, it would be really fast for them to go in and make this change. So what's complex to you, because of their years of experience, wouldn't take them very much time at all. And they would actually rather help you walk through it and get better than just doing it themselves. But you've got to meet them in the middle. And that kind of gets back into the communication as well. So if they're giving you feedback and asking you to make changes in the code, you should make those changes right away and go ahead and resend those up. So I'll often, some of my PRs, we end up with 200 comments back and forth because they're mentoring me through, but they're asking me and they'll mark it like a nit. Can you please change the name of this variable, or whatever the case may be, in order to keep it consistent with the way that they need the code to look. And so whenever I get those code reviews, no matter what I'm doing, I'll make those changes and then push it back up. Because then we both know that I'm starting from, all of this stuff has been handled, and the code is now starting from this point down. So they don't have to go back and revisit the entire code and try to figure out which pieces did and didn't get done that were requested. So it's just kind of a good citizenship to keep on top of your reviews and make sure that you're getting those changes done right away or very shortly after, just so that everybody's starting at the same place. And then it's also fine to say that you no longer want to contribute for any reason. And that's where I said, but know when to quit. If you realize that you're in over your head and you're asking way too many questions, and you can feel that you're getting maybe more delayed answers, or maybe even some sharper answers, or maybe this is something that's just a little bit too big for you right at this moment, and that's okay. And that's, again, back to the communication. Just send a message saying, hey, you know what? This got to be a little bit too much for me, or again, I'm just too busy, whatever the case may be, and just let them know. And they can take the work that you've done to that point and either finish it out or assign somebody else to it, or whatever, but then they know what's happening and they can make some decisions on their end. And then the final thing that I wanted to just say, because this just came up into my Twitter feed this morning, ironically, and it really struck me because it really kind of sums up a lot of the things that I feel kind of speak to some of the things that I like about open source, in addition to being the ability to get in there and show and prove that I can in fact code and that I can in fact work as a team member and be a successful participant in a project, which is really great both for my self-esteem but also for my resume. There's a community feel to the whole open source world. And so this was written this morning by Ben Lech. He was one of the core developers on the Angular, and he currently, I think, it doesn't actually show. I didn't set it up to show on there, so I'm just going to read it. So he just said, every good thing that has come into my life from open source came from my involvement in the community and not necessarily the code. No one ever looked at the code I've landed in open source and said, that's really efficient code. I think I want to work with this guy. Instead, time and time again, it's been my interactions with others and involvement in the community that has presented the most opportunity. I started off in tech from a non-traditional background. I firmly didn't think I belonged to things like open source, and certainly didn't think I could hold ranks with folks at places like Google and Netflix. But what I've learned is that open source needs all kinds of people. In fact, it needs more kinds of people. And success in open source isn't about pedigree or even necessarily technical skill. It's about your interactions and your involvement in the community. And success might not come in the shape you think. It could just be new opportunities, but it could also be learning something new, making a new friend, or getting your name out there. The biggest success you'll have in open source is helping other people. So the experiences will be different. Some people's experiences will be different than mine. The rewards you experience from involvement in open source will be different, but you surely help people, and with that, you will surely find rewards in the open source work. And it just really summed up, like, it's truly been a fantastic experience. In the process of me helping out on these repos, like literally I'm helping them out. The team that I'm on has 2 main developers, and they spent the last 2 years transitioning to a React front end. And they haven't been able to do feature additions and things that the community's been asking for because they had to get a stable version first. And so me coming in and being able to help them get these features added in is taking that burden and that load off of them, and it's helping them. And at the same time, I'm getting a tremendous amount of help just by being able to improve my skills, have them give me feedback that when I was working at home by myself, I didn't get. I don't know if my code looks good. I don't know if that function that I just wrote that works is really the best function that I should have chosen, or is it a little bit more convoluted than it needs to be? So my helping them allowed them to then help me, and it's just a really great process. So I can't stress enough like how excited I am to share with you all, and hopefully get everybody involved. Oh, sorry, reset my. To get everybody interested in getting involved. So if you ever have questions, ping me, let me know. I'm here most Wednesday nights. Happy to sit down and help. So that's it. Unless y'all have other questions. And I'll go ahead and put that slide back up again that has those links. So questions? Anybody? Yeah.
Is your slideshow online?
It's not. I could probably figure out how to do it. I did it in Keynote, so I'm sure there's a way to do it, right?
You've done it in Google Slides, you said.
I could have done it in Google Slides and made it be really
You
easy.
in the Slack channel, right?
Yeah, I actually have a resource document. Yeah, I'll figure out how to do that. I'll figure out how to do that, and it'll probably happen later today, maybe tomorrow, but for
And
sure.
do you have any opinion about licensing if you're starting a new open source project like MIT versus GPL, like copyright versus copyright?
Right. I don't, because I don't know the nuances of the licenses. I do know that there are certain requirements that you have to have depending on the license, and so obviously my recommendation would be to make sure you pick the one that you can live by. So.
But starting out more strict is better than
Yeah,
less,
you can
because
always loosen it up.
you can change your license later, but if you mess around and put your entire code base out there under MIT, and someone else wants to, whatever, and then you want to make that proprietary.
That's how I've started, because I wanted to share, but I didn't know, exactly the scope of who I might want to pick up my code early on.
Right.
But then, I need to look at contributor policy and maybe dual licensing if I want, use it in other ways, like in my
You ever have any desire to sell anything that you're going to do? Make sure that you check it out first, which, by the way, can be quite complex, the licensing. So hitting online, whatever, don't throw it out there under MIT just because there's a good chance you might write the next awesome something or other, and guess what? Somebody else already grabbed that, and they're, what I mean? So.
Yeah, and on the flip side, I might want to let stuff out more liberally to select audiences, like in the workplace or something. Hey, I already wrote that. Just okay.
I think as a group too, we have access to an IT org. So I'll give you his contact. Are you on Slack?
Yeah, I just joined right
I'll give you the contact, and we can ask that question, and whatever they tell you, you can tell the rest of the community so that we all know.
Okay, thanks.
Or you could do like I do, and all of my public repos have the beer license, which just means you can do whatever you want with it, and if you like it and never run into me in person and you want to buy me a beer, you can. That's my license for everything.
That's great. That's great.
Any other questions? I know I threw a lot at you. Sorry.
Outreach.
That was good.
Oh, yes.
Uh,
So I mentioned throughout the talk that I'm interning with Mozilla. And many of you in this room have heard my story before, so I apologize for the repeat, but we do have some newbies. And some who maybe didn't hear it. So there's an organization called outreachy.org, and their purpose is to get underrepresented individuals involved in free and open source software. And so twice a year, they run an application process, and you can apply to participate in this event or in this project. And the initial application, you give them some basic information, and you answer some little small essay questions, and at which point you're invited or not into the next phase, which is the contribution period. And at that point, you start contributing to the project or projects that you think you would want to work on as an intern. And then if you get selected as an intern, you work for 3 months on that project with your mentors, and it does come with a stipend of $5,500 and a $500 credit towards attending a conference. So there is some money involved with it, which is always nice. Above and beyond the fact that I received the stipend, which was definitely more beneficial than sitting at home typing out tutorials for free, it forced me to finally figure out open source. And that's really kind of, where I've grown to where I am now, as far as my passion for just that whole process. But it's just a really great organization, and the companies that are involved in it are, large scale companies. I mean, Debian and Linux and Mozilla and, like legit open source, like big companies, and you get to be a part of that if you are able to participate in it. And so I highly encourage, if you are at all interested, that you check it out, outreachy.org. Applications for this particular round end on Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. So y'all are on the last few days. You got to get it done if you want to get it done.
It just asks a few questions. It's not that complicated. You
It's
can
not.
answer like
You don't even have, you don't have to send your resume, so you
Right.
don't have to worry about whether or not you're qualified. I'm going to go ahead and send out to Slack that
So
document.
this is the one coming right after yours, right? Your cohort?
Yes, this one starts in March 5th is when the contributions start. It's actually kind of quick
Okay, so
from application
I would like at least one person to get selected. Prior to April, like I did it, then April did it, I would like to keep that thing going. Part of that is that some of the, what do we call them, mentors, they're already know our connection, know about this, so it would be nice to keep it going, right? So kind of get some representation for the IE. I didn't do it for that reason. I did it because when I saw it, they said free trip to wherever they had their all hands meeting. So I had never gone outside of California.
Yeah, I didn't get that.
Yeah. So next thing you know, I'm in Canada for a week getting paid.
Hey.
But they didn't offer that this past cohort.
Yeah, they didn't offer this past
Yeah.
cohort, and I'm not sure that they'll offer.
And I know that was one of the things I was telling April. Like I was trying to hype her up. I'm like, yeah, you're gonna get this, you're gonna get that. And she got none of that. Yeah, but if you guys need help and you want to participate, you want to, try it out, let me know. I'll try to provide you guidance as far as contributions and whatnot. And even if you don't get selected, you can still try again the next cohort. There are people that, for whatever reason, their skills maybe are not up to par, but after 2 or 3 tries, they get selected, right? And regardless of getting selected or not, your contributions to a organization of that size are very rewarding. It is addicting, like April said. As soon as one thing goes into the repository for Mozilla, you feel like a badass. You feel like you actually know what you're doing. So that's wonderful. And then these things go into production. So now your code is out there helping millions of people. So definitely.
And if your mentors like you, they write blog posts about your work.
Yeah, dude.
and
Which
you
is
guys
great
shouldn't-
marketing material.
Shouldn't hesitate if you don't think that your current skill set is capable, because April is a really good example, because you weren't anywhere near where you are now when you
Right.
applied for it, right?
Well, and on top of that, actually, John had to kick my butt to get me to put the application in the first place, because I was convinced,
can't.
no way, I don't have the skill set to be able to contribute to those companies. Are you kidding me? And he was like, just put in your application. Fine. I mean, and then I got in there and I did the first one and I was like, oh, that wasn't so hard. And then the next one was a little harder and I did that one and I was like, oh, I actually kind of know what I'm doing. So it actually, I mean, honestly, yes, my skills have grown, but I had the opportunity to see that I in fact had skills that I was not giving myself credit for. And that is, I mean, irreplaceable. Like I can't. Yeah.
Cool.
Gonna make me cry.
Is it outreachy with a Y?
Yes. Outreachy with a Y.org.
All right.
O-R-G. Yeah.
All right, okay, good.
For those of you guys that are not in the industry yet, it's very good practice.
Yeah.
Coming into a code base that you know nothing about.
Mhm.
You'll be confused for at least a good 2 weeks, and then you'll know what to do. Little by little.
I still spend at least
Yeah.
a day to a day and a half just when I'm switching tasks. Like I'm getting ready, I'm building out a comments feature and I built out phase 1, phase 2, and I'm getting ready to start phase 3. And I spent the last day and a half just reading through the section of code that's going to be impacted by this next edition so that I kind of know where things are. And so once I get started, I'll be able to move through it quick, relatively quicker. But it's these are big code bases. It's a lot and it can be overwhelming at first, but if you just break it down and, just find where's my task and then build from there, it's easier.
You remember what I told you about inspiration?
What was that?
So
Oh,
one
yeah.
of my mentors, I was telling them like, okay, so you're asking me to do this. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Where can I go to like, figure this out, right? So he's like, oh, just look at this other component and get inspiration from there. I'm like, define inspiration. He said, copy paste. That works for me. So yeah, I was working on the network monitor panel and the console panel on Firefox DevTools. It's essentially kind of like the same thing. So I did a lot of copy paste.
No, it's really true though, but there's some other benefits to that too, which is that the code base stays consistent. So there is definitely that. But that is one of the first things that I search for. Okay, I need to add this button. That where in the code is there a button that will function and or look similar to this button? And then I go find it and I look at its code, and if its code is close enough, I copy and paste it. And then I make whatever adjustments I need to make it work for what I'm actually doing. Yeah. Definitely.
Awesome. All right.
Thank you.